Welcome to another episode of Exercise Matters with me, Randall Cooper.
And me, Mick Hughes.
Support for today's episode comes from Premax Performance Skincare. If you're active, you focus on strength, endurance and recovery. But what about your skin? Sweat, friction and the elements take a toll. That's where Premax comes in. High-performance skincare made for high-performance people. From recovery creams to anti-chafe balms, massage creams to exercise-specific barrier creams, we help your skin go the distance. Keep your skin as fit as your body with Premax. Available now at premax.com.
And support for today's episode also comes from Learn.Physio. Health professionals, are you staying ahead of the game? Learn.Physio brings you cutting-edge education from world-class experts in sports and musculoskeletal medicine. Online courses, hands-on practicals and expert resources, all backed by the latest evidence and designed to fit into your busy schedule. To be your best, learn from the best. Get started today at Learn.Physio. Morning, mate.
Good morning, Mick.
Morning.
I'm interested, for the last few episodes, you've been giving us life updates. So I'm just wondering if you've got another one for today.
Mate, I'm still cranking out 4x4, Norwegian 4x4. I'm into, what week am I now? Must be week 4. Week 4 of doing it twice a week. Each week feeling better, more fitter. Energy levels starting to continue to climb. Yeah, I'm even thinking about sneaking in a third one. I don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want to sound too cocky or confident, but the way I'm feeling at the moment, getting through and pacing myself and getting through my 4x4s, I think I've got a third session up my sleeve. So let's work on that soon.
Yarn's had quite an impact on your training. Like you've always dabbled in other things we've talked about on the, but this one just seems to be persistent. You're hanging in there doing it. Yeah.
I like the challenge. I found playing around with some other things like the 30-second hit, 30 seconds hard and fast, like super maximal stuff, and then a couple of minutes recovery. I found that just a bit too hard. Not that 4x4 was easy. I like the way that I'm feeling post ride. I don't feel too, because I'm still on the bike. I think the next challenge would be to probably get up on my feet and start running, and I think that in itself would be a great challenge for me. But at the moment, just found my groove, and it fits into my week really nicely. So I'm just going to keep that going.
Yeah, that was the whole thing I took away from it. It's just the efficiency of it and how much benefit you can get out of such a short period of time. It's really powerful.
Yeah, it's 35 minutes. Like, you've 5 to 10 minute warm up, get through your four sessions. Yeah, it's efficient. And then I've got enough time because I really have only got 45 to 60 minutes in the gym most mornings a week. And that way too, I've got an extra 20 minutes up my sleeve to try and knock out a bit of strength work. So it's fitting into my schedule really nicely. So it's been one of the better finds for fitness for me.
One of the most enjoyable things I think about watching sport is watching people perform under pressure, and the athletes who just, that they're going to rise when the situation is there. They're made for the big stage. They're made for the big events, and it's something that we're going to dig in to today, aren't we? I
thought you were talking about me. Yeah, no, we
need to move on from you, Mick.
Oh, that's really nice of you to say all those nice things. I'm just sitting on a bike, mate. I'm not.
I'm talking about others now. Yes.
Okay, we are talking about others. Yes, performance under pressure. It's today's topic, and I really enjoyed this one, taking a deep dive into the research around it, but also to my special guest that I spoke to, Anthony Klarica, who you know well from your past days working in sport and particularly Hawthorn and whatnot. But I really enjoyed his perspective on things, and I think the thing that I liked most about this chat is, even though we're probably coming at it from a performance lens and how to perform better for our events or our games of sport or whatever it is, but a lot of these messages can and should be taken into the workplace, into exams. If you're at university studying for exams, or you're doing a master's or whatever and you have to do exams, or you're turning up for an interview and you've got a new job interview coming up, and you like me crumble under the pressure. Like I've seriously struggled with performance anxiety for a while. Like I was never an elite athlete by any means. I was on the court with 5 seconds to go to hit the match winning three-pointer for my under 18s or under 20s team. But I definitely felt the performance of standing on stage, talking and presenting, and those butterflies really overcame me. And it's taken me a while to probably become more comfortable with that. But yeah, I've really struggled with that. So to hear some really simple strategies that Anthony put forward was, it was really cool. And I like how he can take a lot of those messages and put it into a real life scenario rather than just on the sporting field. So that was some great chat that everyone will get a lot out of today.
I do know Anthony well, and Anthony is a terrific communicator, and the way that he expresses his thoughts and whatever is terrific. But the other thing about Anthony is that he's got enormous experience with dealing with athletes and people in these situations. So I haven't listened to the comments that you guys recorded together the other day, but I'm really looking forward to seeing how he packages this together.
Yeah. So if you like me up until recently, haven't heard of Anthony or any of Anthony's, I guess, history working in sport and elite performance. He's currently he's the managing director of Elite Performance Sports Psychology. He's a psychologist by trade. If you're looking to know more about Anthony in particular, he's got a website, www.eliteperformance.com.au. He's got over 30 years of experience working in sport, education and corporate arenas, and he's worked with Olympians, AFL teams, Tennis Australia, as well as V8 supercars and motorbike teams. He has a book called The Performance Mindset, which is seven steps to success in sport and life. And he's worked with a number of different people. And what I found great about his book and how he's put things together, he draws on interviews that he's had from a lot of interesting people, including a lady called Bridget Murr, who was the first Australian woman to summit Mount Everest. He's also had some interviews with AFL women's player Taylor Harris and Hawthorn coach and Mitchell. So lots of different, and they're just, a few people that he's talked to along the way to give some perspective on how to, perform better under pressure. So wealth of experience and a really great, genuine guy to talk to. So yeah, I think everyone will like this one.
And learn from it. Because like you said, if people can take away from this episode, if they do get the jitters and the jitters aren't healthy and they don't actually help you with your performance and you feel like it's taking away from your performance, whether it is in sport and life, hopefully some tips from the research that you've kind of looked into, Mick, and also what Anthony's got to say will help people.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a huge topic, right? So like it's, there's lots of different strategies you can employ both in the moment, but also to longer term strategies. But what I've sort of dived into in particular are two ways and two strategies and practical ways, importantly, that we can all integrate into our daily lives in work and in sport. And so I am focusing on today's talk and looking at the research on mindfulness and how we can integrate that into our days and our weeks to help our feelings of pressure and stress, and also positive self-talk. So they're the two things that I'm going to discuss in terms of the research, but also we'll obviously share snippets of Anthony and my a discussion about some of the other more practical things you can bring to the table. So I do want to play a clip first because I do want to I want to share with everyone a better understanding about what stress is and what pressure is and how it may manifest in the body. So this is what Anthony had to say about that.
Yeah, there's no doubt when people perceive pressure or threat, there's no doubt that the brain will interpret that as a general rule. Most people would have heard of fight or flight. You'll either go into attack mode or shutdown mode. And that's what we want to avoid in sport and life in general, whether it's a boardroom or exams, things like that. We want to help people to be trained with their mental skills to avoid the shutdown so they can perform up to what they're capable of. Let's put it this way. If you're trapped or cornered, you're either going to freeze or you're going to take action. Let's put it that way. So you're going to get a rush of chemicals, adrenaline. Your brain's going to go into a problem-solving mode for action, or it's going to go into a shutdown mode, which will be freeze, fear, and you won't be able to act. To put it really simply, your brain can either really work for you and it can help be composed and problem solve under pressure, and it'll go into an action mode, or it'll shut down and you won't be able to act. You're going to sort of more a freeze mode, which is far more common than people want to realize or appreciate. And you get a lot of physiological symptoms and responses to that.
So fight or flight, that's basically the nutshell to what a lot of people feel and experience when pressure is thrust upon them. So yeah, I like that, I guess, breakdown from Anthony. Yeah, either take flight or you freeze. And I've had lots of moments of both.
And I suppose in the sporting context, it's not all about like, you're playing football and you're standing on the field and it's a big moment. Clearly people just don't stop still and just stand there and just watch the play going around them. But it may manifest itself very subtly. And you see this with the yips where, like kicking for goal, or the golfers who just can't kind of get it together. And it's just those small little motor errors where people are fearful of what's going to happen versus someone who you just go, I know they're going to kick this goal, or I know they're going to hit this drive. Like you just can feel it and you can sense it. And that's that fight or flight for sure.
Yeah, and that's where Anthony did talk about some strategies, and we'll obviously go through them today, about how we can, in the moment, setting up for goal, to kick the goal to win the game, or even just kick any goal, to sink that putt, like to win the PGA Championship. And there's many really famous cases of professional athletes getting the yips on the world stage. And yeah, there's some, surprisingly very simple things that we can take home and take with us today. So the paper one that I'm going to cover first is one on, it's called The Effects of Mindfulness Practice on Performance Relevant Parameters and Performance Outcomes in Sport. And it's a meta-analysis from 2017. The authors took 19 controlled trials that included about 290 people, and the papers in themselves had to have done some degree of mindfulness training. Now, there's a lot of different programs that you can do that are called mindfulness, so I'm just going to sort of clump them into one discussion point here, rather than sort of break them all down into all those really separate types of mindfulness programs you can take. And basically they were compared against a control group that didn't do the mindfulness training. They also, not only did they look at outcome measures such as, in the sporting context, accuracy or scores or whatever, they did also to look at some physiological markers that also to indicate stress. So the study, as I said before, 290 healthy sporting participants, and the sports included that they were looked at included athletics, cycling, darts, hammer throwing, hockey, judo, rugby, middle distance running, shooting, sprinting, volleyball. And they were done, the mindfulness program themselves went for at least 4 weeks, to some lasting as long as 2 years, with the sessions going from at least twice a week to once a week, and range roughly up to about 50 to 60 minutes, which is quite a long time when you sort of look at it. Mindfulness to some could be as, I guess the talking at this stage is, you could take as little as 10 minutes to sort of get some mindfulness done. But in these studies, they were done for such a long period of time, and probably longer than what most people would probably take into account. But nevertheless, the outcome measures were scores, as we said, but also to physiological markers such as cortisol, immune markers, heart rates, VO2 max, but also to some other things like anxiety scores were also looked at as well. And obviously objective markers, shooting accuracy, distance run, all those kind of things too. The results were pretty overwhelming in a positive, that mindfulness training showed a robust increase in the ability to handle stress. And that was both in a physiological sense. There were decreased cortisol levels and decreased immune system changes, decreased resting heart rates, all these things that will sort of tell us that the person is a lot calmer. They have less anxiety and apprehension and a better flow. So these people felt better on the court or in the field when they were performing. But importantly, obviously, their objective markers in sport and performance were largely better, and they had meaningful gains when it came to the mindfulness, in particularly sports that required precision, such as shooting and darts. They were probably the two things that stood out. So much so that if we broke down the study in particular, elite pistol shooters, for example, they had significantly better outcome scores over 5 weeks of training. They did 6 days a week of mindfulness, but only 20 minutes a session. So this was probably a shorter intervention than the average that was put forward. Darts had, over a 7-week program, had better dart performance and higher scores than
Can I just clarify
group.
did the darts mindfulness consist of 2 beers at the pub every day?
Possibly. I didn't say
I just
whether
can't
or not the
imagine
alcohol
the
was.
just sitting there in a state of zen doing yoga. I just cannot picture it. But anyway.
Side note here, I remember a story from a few years ago. A guy gave up his day job. I'm not sure what career he was in. I think he was banking or finance or some, meaningless office job to him. He quit his day job and basically tried to turn himself into a professional dart player by basically practicing darts. I don't know how far he went. I just remember reading this headline. But yeah, of all the sports, how good would that to be an elite dart thrower? But they're not as big and burly as what they used to be. You see some of them up on the TV now. They're actually reasonably fit. Cyclists had better flow and decreased sport anxiety too. So a couple of examples there of better performance, physiological measures, outcome measures, and less anxiety and stress and better flow with this mindfulness training. So yeah, fairly interesting study, but probably not surprising either after from what we've learned from Anthony already in these early stages, that, if we can handle our flight or fight response better, it can result in better outcomes in the sports that we're playing.
It's probably the biggest takeaway from all my time working with professional athletes, elite athletes, is that the mind's more important than the body. And that comes to attitude, that comes to dealing with pressure, that comes to consistency and habit. Like, if you don't have it between the ears and you haven't got good skills there, and these definitely can be trained, then you don't perform at the highest level. You've just got to be good mentally to be a good athlete.
Yep. Agree. Anthony had some really helpful tips for handling in the moment situations for physical activity in sports across the board. So I'll play this clip and you can hear some of his recommendations.
Let's think of two different avenues for dealing with something in the moment. Let's start with physical strategies, because as we said before, you'll experience your stress physically as well as cognitively or with your thinking or emotions. So in the moment, breathing and diaphragmatic breathing is a really big deal. There's a lot of discussion these days on breath work, and I encourage a lot of athletes and people in general to use breath work. There's a lot of physiology behind it, which affects how you think, and creates physiological symptoms that people end up getting worried about. So diaphragmatic breathing is absolutely vital. It helps keep a balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, which helps reduce physical symptoms and helps you keep attention onto what's important. So breathing is one big strategy. But following on from what I just mentioned about helping your attention, redirecting your focus to just that moment. What's important in the next 1 or 2 minutes? What's important in the next 3 or 5 minutes, if we're talking about just the moment? And redirecting your attention there, because it's when you get a bit stressed or worried and you've got to work through something, all sorts of information will come into your mind, and that'll take you to all sorts of places, maybe something in the past, something in the future, way too ahead of you, or something that's not important. And good athletes, and we try to coach a lot of people to redirect their attention to what's important right at the moment. So that's a focus skill. So we've got a physical skill, we've got a focus skill there, Mick. And maybe another skill some people use is just to settle themselves down. There's other techniques like grounding. So you might feel your feet in your shoes, or you might look at something just to settle you down to get your attention back on path. You could have breathing, you could have other physical skills, and you can have some focus or thinking skills to be in the moment, work out what's important just at the moment.
So there's a couple of really nice strategies there, and some that are incredibly helpful for in the moment. I like the breathing. Breathing's, we're starting to see lots of that coming together. I think the New Zealand Warriors in the rugby league are quite famous for it. After they score a try, they get together as a group, and you can see them take all these 3 big breaths, and then they sort of center themselves. I think they've certainly. Yeah, I'm not sure if this was a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if they've changed because they weren't winning a couple of years ago too. I don't know if it was working for them, but maybe they've sort of redirected their energy elsewhere. But I know the breathing was also too really helpful, getting themselves back in the moment as well, really helpful. And I like that grounding strategy too. I don't do it necessarily in a physical context, but I'll certainly do it when I'm out for my morning walks and I'm trying to sort of, get be present for the right here, right now. I won't be walking barefoot necessarily, but I'll be sort of paying attention to, almost like be saying trees, bird, car, road, like just sort of seeing what's around me and grounding myself into the right here, right now. So, really simple things that we can bring into our daily lives, and certainly in the midst of sport.
Yeah, I like the comment about just focus on what's just in front of you for the next little while. Years ago, I did the Oxfam walk, which is a 100-kilometre walk that you have to do within 48 hours. And I remember it was probably about 50 or 60 kilometres into that, I felt terrible. I thought that I might want to give up, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what Anthony was talking about, because at that point, then all these negative thoughts come into your head about, I'll be so embarrassed if I can't finish. I've still got 40 or 50 kilometres to go. How am I going to get through this? But then I did that, and I brought it back inside myself, is you just got to get to the next checkpoint. Okay, the next checkpoint is 3 kilometres away. And at that point, you can have a rest, you can refuel, you can stretch, you can talk. That's what you got to do. And I did that. And once I got past that hurdle, it was great. I felt really good again. And I probably went through that process 3 or 4 times. But the cliche I've heard quite a lot is eat the elephant one piece at a time. And just make sure that you're just doing and focusing on the process is the cliche rather than the outcome. And that's what the good athletes do all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I like how, the 1 minute at a time, like one minute's a long time in sport. 3 minutes is a long time in sport. Focusing on the right here and right now, I think is really, really important. Oh, I've never heard that, eat the elephant at the time. I like that one. It's,
one piece at a time. Yeah, that's it.
Awesome. Paper 2 is taking some of that and now looking at particularly positive self-talk and trying to sort of turn what you just mentioned there is those negative sort of thoughts and bubbles that are coming into your head and trying to put a positive spin on it. And this is paper 2. It was a trial as opposed to a systematic review or meta-analysis, but it was a trial of students who are performing their year 12 exams, university students who are sitting and performing their final year exams. So the paper was called Turning the Knots in Your Stomach into Bows and Reappraising Arousal and the performance that it has on exams in university students. So we had 60 university students, 31 male, 29 female, and they were followed up over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. So what they did was there was a random assignment to the reappraisal group were encouraged, and they were told that the feeling arousal can help their test performance. So the butterflies that they get in their stomach, the jitters they get, this kind of nervous anxiousness, this flight or fight response, they were told that this feeling it's an arousal feeling and actually can help their test performance. Whereas the control group were there was no feedback given. They were going into the exam with just letting that I guess those negative feelings or that anxiety just sort of sit within them. They did have some outcome measures observed, both physiological and performance. So the physiological ones were saliva that were collected pre and post exams that looked at a particular part of the saliva called the salivary alpha amylase, or SAA, which is a marker of sympathetic activation linked to challenging states. And then the performance measures were their outcomes in their maths and verbal exams. And that was followed up 3 months later. I correct myself. I think I said 6 to 12 months later. They were followed 3 months later when their exams results were given. So the results were quite fascinating. Is that the reappraisal group had a higher reactivity from baseline of their saliva group versus the control group. The appraisal group also, with that saliva increase, it predicted a higher math score. Didn't predict a higher verbal test, but it resulted in a higher math score for the individuals. And that follow-up, they were found to have, when they asked the participants later, is that the reappraisal group, so the group that were told that this anxiety is going to be a positive thing, they reported that the arousal actually helped them more and they worried less about anxiety and they felt more secure and sure about themselves in future exams versus the control group. So I think that's something that's really strong there, is that these acknowledging of stress and I guess reframing it as a positive, I think is a really important measure. And this is what was found in this study. And it's certainly it's a low cost intervention that we can sort of utilize to our advantage rather than sort of let these butterflies sit within us and affect our performance. We can sort of see it as a positive thing. So some interesting studies there, but it only helped with the maths scores. This was I guess the overriding conclusion here. It didn't necessarily affect the verbal or test results, but definitely the maths for some reason.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've heard of other studies that are quite similar where people going into exams, if they tell themselves a narrative that they're not as good, I don't deserve to do well on this test, and I'm in an inferior group, i.e. of some race or culture or whatever, I won't do as good as the white males, for instance, they actually do worse. Whereas if the narrative, when they're told before they go in and they're very self-affirming that this is a positive thing, I'm ready for this, and in the case of this research, it's like these butterflies are going to help me actually perform better, then they do. And again, it comes down to the power of the mind, and the story that you're telling yourself in that moment is critical.
Yep. Yeah. So Anthony had some really interesting things to talk about this positive self-talk, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, a lot of the strategies that elite athletes use apply directly across to work, to classroom, to life in general. And I have clients who we would use very similar strategies that you'd use with someone running out in a grand final, that you'd use in other instances in life. And I think if people appreciate looking at athletes and what they do as being applicable to them, if that resonates and you can vicariously relate to it, yeah, for sure. So some of those strategies would be preparing. Athletes are very good at recalling the preparation they've done. That helps them build their confidence. They don't just go into an event thinking, oh yeah, great, we'll see how we go. So they're aware of what they've done well. They're aware of pitfalls in advance, and they plan for those pitfalls. They don't just think everything will be positive all the time, which is what some people consider. Athletes are aware of the challenges and they plan ahead of time for that challenge. That actually makes it easier to deal with the challenge, because as we discussed earlier, when you're in that challenge scenario, it's very difficult to problem solve. Yep. So if you've brainstormed a couple of solutions or planned a solution before, I call it sometimes a planned response, then it's easier to default or go to that response rather than shrink in a challenging scenario. So the self-talk is a really big tool that people could use in general, that athletes are very, very good at. They plan ahead of time how they want to think, so that can influence their action. And then they'll consider that in their visualization, in their preparation. They won't just wait, and they'll use it in their training as well. That's some of that self-talk. They won't just wait to use it on the big day when they're under pressure. So that self-talk becomes part of their daily sort of narrative or their daily language, and therefore it becomes more part of you, which means it's easier to use on the day. And that's a really big deal. And I think more people could deal with worries. That's one part of self-talk, or they could just have proactive self-reassurance or self-encouraging self-talk.
So the self-talk and the planning, they were the two big ones that sort of came out of that is that preparation. I think that goes hand in hand positively. Like if you've got like you've got a game or you've got a performance or you've got an exam, it's kind of obviously having a plan in place is really important of how you want to perform on the day or in the exam or in the interview. But then it also too needs to be laid in with that positive self-talk. And I think that's the couple of big things there I took away from Anthony's conversation there in that part.
And I'd add to that, I think that the most important thing Anthony said there is also that they practice this in training. And again, I've seen this because you like being a physio who's working the back side of sport for a lot. You see the personality of athletes, behind the scenes is very different to sometimes what they are on field. And once they cross that line, whether it's a training session, whether it's a game, they go into this mindset of like, I'm here to compete. I'm going to put myself under stress and pressure, even if it's just a training session. And they do that so often, like in training, that when it comes to game day, it's like I've been here 3,000 times. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to back myself because I've already done it 100 times, as opposed to the person who's the lazy trainer, in inverted commas, thinking, yeah, I've got some natural ability and I can pull it all together on game day, and it gets to game day and they crumble.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot to say by, I guess, once again, being in the moment and actually having some skin in the game and being there for those tight finishes and experiencing that stress. And you sort of see that, with a number of sporting clubs and the players that be able to stand up because they've been there in those tight finishes. They performed, and been able to sort of, compete the task and win the game. They've been there, but a lot of that stuff is already played out in the training sessions before that. To Andrew Russell recently, a lot of coaches now at AFL level have sort of shifted to these problem solving training sessions where they sort of provide a scenario for the players. They might be 10 points down with 2 minutes to go. How are you going to sort of find a win and scratch a win out of this training? So a lot of good coaches also too will sort of train in that fashion. Interesting how things have evolved. Anthony had some really interesting things about reassurance as well. I'm going to play this clip because it was quite valuable too, and I think this basically goes hand in hand with that positive self-talk. So I'll play that now.
What about because in the moment people can get a bit distressed, and you got to be able to problem solve in the moment as well. So we said redirect your attention to what's important, but look at a couple of options and stay composed. So reassurance, it's okay, rather than panic. If you can reassure yourself and help tell yourself it's okay, I'll be all right, then you'll open yourself up to problem solve. Whereas a lot of people panic and then you're in trouble. That's when you do the breathing and the other stuff. But I have a bit of a saying, Mick. 1 minute is a very long time. 3-5 minutes is a very long time, and a lot can happen in sport in that time. And what I've learnt working in sport is it's actually true. How you handle 1 minute is really important. There's a Chinese proverb that says a moment of anger lasts many years. So even a moment is a long time for how you compose and handle that scenario. So reassure yourself that you'll be okay, settle down, and then you can solve something a lot quicker.
I just think that last bit in particular, a moment of anger can last a long time, and that's where that ability to compose yourself under pressure, to be able to use your in the moment strategies such as breath work, which then sort of goes into your positive self-talk, which then gives you your reassurance to be able to make a decision. That's so critical, and I think we all have had moments there where we've kind of become angry on the field or on the court, dropped our bickies and lost our bundle, spat the dummy, whichever sort of Australian slang you want to use to say that you've just you stuffed up. But being able to use those simple strategies, and hopefully people have got some little things there they can take away with them.
Yeah, no, I like that too.
Yep. We've so far talked about, and Anthony has given us some really good tips on how we can handle the in the moment and short-term strategies. But I did ask him about what about some long-term things we could all integrate as well that will give us a more sustainable, I guess, positive, longer-term strategies to help us with performing under pressure. And this is what he had to say.
Well, as far as that long-term performance goes, I'm a strong advocate for planning, then investing in the plan and what's needed to execute the plan, and then reviewing. And that happens on a constant, almost day, if needed, a daily basis. So athletes will have a 4-year plan to get to the Olympics, but then they'll have a 1-year plan, a 1 month or a training cycle plan. That comes down to a week. That'll come down to a day. And they might even journal that. So they'll have an idea of in their journal. They'll plan out the week, what it might look like. they'll have some flexibility because life happens, right? Sport and work and all these sort of things, they don't stop for life. Things happen in life. So plan, invest in yourself and what's required to execute the plan, but then review ongoing. What do I need to adapt? How do I need to change a plan? How am I going with the plan? So forth. They're really vital strategies to use on a daily basis. Building in some of those other things you referred to, like mindfulness or meditation, that they can be really important habits to build in as well to help you stick to the plan and have energy for the plan, because a lot of people have plans but don't follow through. So you've got to ask yourself what gets in the way and how can I be strong with that? So, mindfulness is about being in the present, not worrying about the past or the future, and about really how you can direct your attention just to that. So we get people to practice mindfulness. That could be through breathing, and there's even things, Mick, like passive or active mindfulness. Some people might just go for a short walk in the morning, 5 or 10 minutes, or do something at home in the morning just to set their day up. That could be a mindfulness type plan. Whereas meditation, people talk about that as well. That's more about clearing or emptying your mind so that you can stay calm. And people would often do that so they've got energy for what's important. So there is a difference between mindfulness and meditation that a lot of people don't quite understand. Hopefully that gives a little bit of understanding in a brief time.
So there's a couple of really simple things. Obviously, there's a load more things that people could do, but definitely planning is going to be cornerstone to long-term success. But then you can sort of build in those daily habits and in the moment habits that get you to where you want to perform. And it's not going to be something obviously that changes overnight. If you've got problems with anxiety and dealing with stress and you're dealing with pressure situations, it's going to be a long work in progress. And I can for myself say it's been many years of sort of lots of talking and putting myself on, like when I get my performance anxiety, when I step on stage and deliver a talk or a presentation or run a workshop, a lot of that's graded exposure over time and reflecting. And I think that's the big thing that I took away, is being able to reflect and review and know, okay, what can I do better next time to make it? How can I prepare myself better for next time? Or if something went wrong within the talk or the presentation, okay, I know that's what went wrong. Okay, I'm going to try and correct that for the next one that I have to deliver. So it's a constant review and work in progress. So yeah, we don't have obviously all the answers in this talk, but I think I wanted to shine a light on some very simple things that we could all take away from that. And Anthony was a wealth of experience. And so if you want to learn more, we had his website and his book, The Performance Mindset, and his website, eliteperformance.com.au. So if you want to know more about some of that, or even engage with Anthony yourself, feel free to check those two resources out.
Just one comment before I think we're going to wrap things up, Mick, but with Anthony's comments before, he mentioned having a plan, which is just crucial. I've never met any athlete that's kind of achieved anything they wanted to do without a plan. But the crucial thing for me was flexibility within that plan when things start to go wrong. I always love Mike Tyson's comment is everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And you'll find that life just interjects itself into your preparation for whether you're going to do your first marathon or you want to go to the Olympic Games. You've got to almost expect that things are going to go wrong at that time and preempt it and say, when it is, I know I'm going to deal with it okay, and I'm just going to have flexibility in what I've achieved, because so many people with their exercise just want to kind of make sure I'm getting session after session after session done because that's in my plan. If it doesn't go well, they can sometimes crumble as a result. So that flexibility is very important.
Yep, agree. That was a great one. Learn a ton from Anthony, and hopefully all our listeners have got some little nuggets of gold out of that podcast as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, mate, that's a wrap for today's episode of Exercise Matters. If you enjoyed the chat, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review and share it with your mates. A quick disclaimer, as always, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not medical or individual advice. Always seek guidance from a qualified health professional for your specific needs. A big thanks to our sponsors Premax, high-performance skincare for high-performance people, and Learn.physio, world-class education for health professionals. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.